Good. Can we just do enter rejoice? I mean, not like you're getting happy, but just clearly, Right. Here we go. Just right at the end. Ready? Enter rejoice. Yeah, makes sense?
Yes.
It just makes a clean cut.
So when you're putting your fingers down for that final emphasis on the piano, that's when we're putting our tongues up for the nut.
That's exactly right. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Right on it. Yep. That was good. I didn't hear anybody hang over, so that was the main. I just wanted to.
You may be hungover, but we didn't hang over.
Right. Good. All right. Everybody see how that works?
Yeah.
Just be vigilant in that one, and just remember to wait. It's going to be really good fun, and just give you more energy every time. Okay.
And so it's really just one measure extra between each verse.
That's right. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Yeah, that's right. It's just that I changed I start the last measure already in the new key.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, you're right though. It's really only one additional measure of time. Yes.
I've been memorizing the open words, the next words, and I've been watching your head bob.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
We haven't gone all the way through rehearsing the timing of.
Right. They're all the same though. They're all the same. It never changes. It's like you should feel the air settle before you sing. You know, you should be comfortably here. It should have arrived. I shouldn't be doing something. I should be doing something. It should have arrived at a thing that's just going and going and going. Okay, good. Does anyone want to do that again? No. I didn't think so. Just be vigilant and it will be fine. It will be just fine.
But if anybody else wants to, I'm good.
Dark never do it without Larry. That's okay.
Right. What's the next one?
Dark of Winter, 55. 55.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do for this one, this will be coming out of the prayer meditation moment. I'm going to just play the first two phrases as an introduction for this. I think that'll be enough for us. So I'll just do something like. Surrounds me. Let my thoughts Yes, I will. The last thing you will hear will be the full four part, exactly as you're about to sing it.
How's the balance? I'm hearing 12, but maybe it's because we were facing so many tenors.
It's actually, you're hearing a lot of tenors? Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of tenors too, which I love.
And we love too.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, when we get to, and then my soul, I'm singing out. But it
And you
just,
should.
it seems like the spot
So,
to,
so do we need to come up?
yeah, you need to join us.
It is interesting, because I'm hearing more soprano than I usually hear, because
That's because we got.
I'm okay. Why don't you just stay out there? Yeah. This is not that the melody isn't interesting in this song, but I think no part is really more interesting than another in this. And so I'm not super concerned about. Yeah. I'd rather more fun, interesting. But okay. I just want to do that again, and I just want to move it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So here we go. Yeah, stand for one. So here's the intro. Really good. Absolutely spot on. I know it seems to come as a shock every time that happens, but you're doing great. Let's see. I just want to add one very small thing, very small. In the second verse, when we get quieter on a still small voice, then we also add a still small lift after the word still. Okay? A still small voice of love. Now don't let that slow anything down, but just lift after that word. But because they come up, and I think that's a really cool thing. Good.
can we sing it
My
one
mask
time?
smells like garlic. All I'm thinking about right now.
So you want us to honor that comma?
I
after
do.
Still.
Yes. I think it just draws a lot of attention to the word. Let's actually just try that right now. Sing, and then my soul may hear a voice, a still small. You don't actually have to breathe if you don't need a breath, they're just still, small, just out in the air. Good. And then my soul may hear a voice verse 2. Here we are, and go. And then my soul may hear a voice, a still, small voice of love eternal. Good, yes, that's exactly right. Good.
I heard differing amounts of pause after the word small. Are you wanting pauses?
Yeah, but still, that's not the next bill.
Still.
But
So
also.
it's just one pause in there?
Yes, still, small voice of love. Yep, just after still, only with the comma. Good. So, yeah, that sounds really great. Okay. Anything anybody wants to go over? You await Larry with great anticipation. But if not, I'll just sing bass. That works fine. That works absolutely fine.
Larry will be fine.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
I guarantee
He's a
you.
pro.
And I'll be better.
Larry will be with
Yeah.
you.
Let's see.
If Larry's not here, I could sing the bass part with,
No, I will sing it. Larry.
Okay.
Don't worry. I don't want to take any.
you don't want to take that tenor
This is
power
a
away.
great
huh?
tenor part. It's a really great tenor part. Okay, let's see. Well, great. This is sounding really good. This is going to be a lot of fun. Reminder that Spirit of Life is also happening at the end. We are going to invite the congregation in on that and sing whatever the heck you want. That will not be choir-led, so to say.
Now, can people come these hymns?
We're going to bring. I mean, if they want.
I mean, I'm going to be saying, and now we'll sing the third paragraph.
Right.
I'll get to your mass that you said you.
I wouldn't say,
would like.
I would say the choir sing.
Yeah, I would like it. Not Spirit of Life. Spirit of Life is a.
Yes, yeah.
We put a lot of work in. I want to show off all of our fine details that you've had.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there have been two big changes.
Yes.
One is that we're in person, the second is that everyone is singing.
Well, Spirit of Life we've been doing. We've been inviting people to do Spirit of Life kind of quietly as a meditation. We've done that. We were doing that several weeks back when we were meeting. When we were back in December and November, that was kind of our one. Yeah, and then Christmas Eve was different, but Spirit of Life had kind of been we were letting people do it softly. And that's also why it's at the end of the service. Spirit of Life is the last thing that happens. So, okay.
Air circulation, that's what Steve went over to get going. And
Right.
I definitely can feel it over here. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah.
Much better temperature.
All right.
It's already exhausting. It's already exhausting.
Great. Well, everything sounds really good. Sing your hearts out. I hope you're happy to sing for people. And remember the workshop on Wednesday. Sound check has been ongoing. That's why it's great to rehearse it. We don't have to do that. Or sound check. Yes. No, but then just a chair. So I guess that's the other character. There are one extra chair, right? No,
Larry's right here.
That's an empty chair.
Who's the one that's Doug?
Yes, it was empty. That's Doug Richards.
Doug wasn't here on Wednesday, though. I'm trying to think of
He wasn't here Wednesday.
who else did we have on Wednesday? Chris Murphy and someone.
You had Ellen over here.
Well, right, Ellen was over there.
So we put a chair over here.
Anyway, I will remove this chair and you can maybe just slide over. Yeah, I don't want to step up late.
I would leave it there because of the cable. Which I worry about people tripping over that extension.
Yeah, I'll move this. Yep.
Yeah, so the desk, yeah, yeah.
I don't want it to go. I'm not gonna. But
Are you ready for a sound check?
should be fine, and then you can just let it go in a moment.
Oh, this.
Yeah. Right, yeah, you can just slide it. But no, perfect. Oh, yeah, no, it's fine.
She put her life in hand by using these quickly.
Pick it up with the tab, and it's actually
Oh,
clear to
okay.
balance. And
Oh, that's
the other
better.
thing is, if you can hold it not beyond the microphone, but you can do it with this. You'd have to step this back.
Okay. Do what?
You'd have to hold this back to hold that in front of the microphone.
Okay.
And the one other thing is,
Yeah, I don't do
when
that.
you hit it,
Okay.
you're pulling away as you hit it,
Okay.
and you get an easier tone.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can try different angles, whatever works.
All right. Well, by December I should have it.
No, it's fun to practice. You can't really overstrike it because you can always adjust it by pulling it closer or further away.
Got it. Is that an okay one?
Yeah, I was just trying to make it as singing and mellow. I try to think, is it singing or is it? It's
Singing like it was bashed.
yeah.
No.
Some people like to do it that way. The
Yeah.
key is still the same. Hit it and be pulling away as you hit it. That's actually all percussion. Yeah.
Got it.
See how much more mellow it is?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Say what? Okay. Oh yeah. Whew. Okay. Should I stand up on that thing or should I just stand on the ground? Which? What? Doesn't matter. Okay.
It was awesome. Oh, it was so fun. Yeah, I have enough going on. Oh, yeah, but I mean, I said it kind of to everybody. Yeah, thinking who knows who would come. Very fun.
I got some later from skating methods when I was going to. I really wanted to know it.
So I've never done it. When I did it, I was somewhere about it's so weird. I thought I might be people to do normally. Like, yeah, it's great. We had, I mean, we couldn't have done people that so there were like 10 teams. And it was just totally fun. And we had a walk iron and there were all sorts of weird things in it. It was really fun. Yeah. I'm just thinking that this, so I haven't, yeah, so I haven't understood that up. Like if somebody sits there, they're gonna block it. So that was the original plan. It was 1 year, everyone there. And then they just bought one. And then some people, right, and then some people who said that they think one is enough. To me, that doesn't make sense. Screen. Right, I mean, to me, that feels. Right, that's the problem. Exactly. Right. I mean, they're not like that one is definitely going in. So I don't. Oh yeah.
And then it asked whether I should keep the original format. I said yes. And it said I asked for the link, and I said no.
So did it let you grab the whole thing in one day, or did you just let you grab them all?
I grabbed, I opened it, and I grabbed the whole thing.
Yep.
First, then I did the second one. This is going to take a while.
Yay! Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I wasn't thinking.
Oh, words are on it. All the words that you can actually see when just switch it if you don't, whatever.
Good, so I'll just switch it when you finish reading the words. It must have taken somebody who's going to want to.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Hi. I have a look for you.
Good. Oh, that was
I've been driving around in my car. You're welcome. I was hoping one day. You have a pin? So my parents got me Jerry.
Hey, Margie, are you there?
Well, I'm glad you want it. Very welcome.
So, Margie, if you make me a co-host, I can let people in.
Like those small, very excited they made them, and then I know that's not it. So this is law approval with and then sometimes the I'm the queen of that.
Good morning. We recognize that CVUUS gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect their spiritual relationship to the land. We hope to learn from them how we can live together in peace and justice. And I will add that I look forward to us as a congregation figuring out how we're going to do that learning, because I think that's important for us to all be a part of as we acknowledge the land on which we meet. So it's wonderful to be back here in person, to see live bodies in front of me. And it's also our welcome back to winter after a little mud season extravaganza the last couple days. I don't know about where you live, but it was very muddy where my home is. Tomorrow's Valentine's Day, which is why I have decked myself in red and hearts. Not the kind that can be fraught with disappointment if you don't get the right thing or the right card or from the right person. Not what's traditionally sold as Valentine's. It happens to be one of my favorite holidays. In fact, I run a summer camp and we celebrate Valentine's Day on July 14th every summer. But it's because long ago I chose to embrace a celebration of all kinds of love and see it as a way to tell all the people that are important to us why we love them and why they're important to us. Last year I was the fortunate recipient of some cards from some UU kids, which really brightened up my Valentine's Day. And when I went to the mail yesterday, there were a couple there too, again. So I hope that take the bull by the horns and give that love out, and hopefully some will return to you as well. In your order of service, there are some pathways to connection, which a couple of which I would like to highlight for you. We are collecting, and Rutland is collecting, supplies for new Afghan households coming to Rutland. And you can get in touch with Abby Sessions if you would like to donate some gently used items or some new things to help set up the homes for, I think they're hoping to get 13 to 15 families. Also on the fourth Wednesday of this month will be the second meeting of a group that's reading Isabel Wilkerson's Cast, The Origins of Our Discontent. It will be online still, so that's on February 23rd. There is a special choir gathering this week, but it was for pre-registered folks. But that will be happening. So our call to worship this morning comes from this new little book. And it's this morning we'll be honoring Black History Month. This book is called BLUU Notes, an Anthology of Love, Justice, and Liberation. And the words I'm going to share with you are drawn from the introductory chapter called About Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, which is the name of the collective of UUs who identify as Black that publish the BLUU Notes. We understand progress as something measured by proximity to our ideals, not distance from our worst moral failings. We don't necessarily need to have shared beliefs as much as we need a shared commitment to act in a world where we are not all yet free. Our Black Unitarian Universalism therefore asks us questions about the beliefs we espouse. Do your beliefs point you to liberation, compassion, love, and justice? Do your beliefs foster communal well-being? Do your beliefs call you to actions that prioritize humanity as only one part of a complex web of existence? Do your beliefs invite you to love folks in the fullness of their complex identity? We are committed to an ongoing interrogation of our beliefs in the light of reason, experience, and expertise. And now I invite Barnaby to light the chalice while together we read the chalice lighting, which comes from John Morgan. And we'll just read it all in unison. You can ignore the slight italics that you might see in your order of service. We'll just read it all together because, and if you're at home, you can read it on your screen. And here we go. In the end, it won't matter how much we have, but how generously we have given. It won't matter how much we know, but rather how we live. And it won't matter how much we believe, but how deeply we love. And now the choir will sing the first hymn.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
I have to selfishly admit, I kind of wanted you guys to just keep going to see how high it could get. All right, keep going. So I'm going to share a book today, and the pictures are hopefully going to be on the screen. I realize the screen's still a bit low, so depending on where you're sitting, if you want to see the pictures, you might want to adjust your chair to be between heads. If you're at home on Zoom, I think you're going to have brilliant images. And this is my first time doing a book this way, so I'm interested to see what people think of it. I'll give you feedback later. So this is a book called The Undefeated by Tommy Alexander, illustrated by Dear Nelson. This is for the unforgettable, the swift and sweet ones who hurdled history and opened the world of possible. The ones who survived America by any means necessary, and the ones who didn't. This is for the undeniable, the ones who scored with chains on one hand and faith on the other. This is for the unflappable, the sophisticated ones who box adversity and tackle vision, who shine their light for the world to see and don't stop until the break of dawn. This is for the unafraid, the audacious ones who carried the red, white, and weary blues on the battlefield to save an imperfect union. the righteous marching ones who sang, "We shall not be moved because Black lives matter." This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unlimited, unstoppable ones, the dreamers and doers who swim across the big sea of our imagination and show us the majestic shores of the promised land, the Wilma Rudolphs, the Muhammad Alis, the Althea Gibsons, the Jesse Owenses, the Jordans and the LeBrons, the Serenas and the Cheryls, the Reese Whitleys, and the undiscovered. This is for the unbelievable, the we real cool ones. This is for the unbending, the black as the night is beautiful ones. This is for the underdogs and the uncertain, the unspoken, but no longer untitled. This is for the undefeated. This is for you, and you, and you. This is for us. And these are my words, this is for all of us, because Black history is American history.
Thank you so much, Poppy. As Poppy mentioned, for those of you who haven't been up with the multi-year discussion on media in our sanctuary, eventually this screen will be up high beyond that pillar. It's been a lot of discussion that's gone into that, but we're still learning how to use it. And there's lots of things that excite us about its potential, but it's never going to be the dominant part of our worship. So we're working on that balance. There's a lot of other things that are in flux. We've been telling you for 2 years, a lot of what we're doing is an ongoing experiment, and we're now in this new stage of the experiment about coming back into the sanctuary. I repeat what's been said, it just makes all the difference to us as the people you've employed as your leaders to be actually able to see you face to face. And yet we're trying to be careful about how fast we get there so that we keep safety in mind. I long for the day when the choir can get rid of those masks when they sing to us, and when we can schedule a program where you can sing throughout the program. Our baby steps today will allow you to sing Spirit of Life with the crowd, with your masks on, towards the end, and we'll just keep working on how close we can get to being back to what we loved most about the past, without taking undue risks. So one thing that is normal for us, whether we're meeting in person or on Zoom, is that we always take an offering that we share with some group that is living out our values in a way that we can't do just within our own congregation. And in February, we've traditionally done that by taking each Sunday and highlighting a different UU affiliate that the donations team has said people should know more about. And this Sunday, the affiliate that we're highlighting is UU Rise, which stands for UU Refugee and Immigrant Services. And this was a group incorporated 15 years ago in Southern California to provide legal aid and advice to immigrants from Mexico and other Latin American countries. It's still largely focused on this particular group, but in principle wants to serve immigrants who come here in difficult situations from all over the world. So I'm sure that they're also, as part of their education, passing out information about the resettlement of Afghan families in the region they're serving, just as we are here. They perform trainings about immigrant rights, all the laws that apply to immigrants, DACA and the DREAM laws, immigrant relief for marginalized people within the community, like LGBTQ plus immigrants, advice for people caught up in domestic violence situations when they're immigrants undocumented, and it's often hard to get legal assistance, advice on how to become a naturalized citizen and become engaged safely in the life of their communities, and advice for UU congregations all over the country about how to work on these issues. So I invite you to be as generous as you are able this morning as we share our offering with UU Rise. And people here can either leave a donation in this basket while the music's playing, or you can send a check to the office. If you've got your phone on you, you can take a picture of the little code in your program and give that way. Thank you. We have the children's chalice up here, just to remind us that eventually we'll have our children back, and at the end of their time with us, they will march off to classes. I don't know when that will start again, but when they do, they'll take their chalice with them. And meanwhile, it was lit, and I was able to use it to relight the main chalice, which doesn't seem used to performing here in the sanctuary after all this time off. But the spirit is there in the two chalices, actually lit a little bit. I have 3 milestones to share, and they represent a range of the kinds of joys and concerns we can celebrate here. The first one came to me via email from Gordon Gibson. And as a number of you know, Gordon's brother Gary has been having a very rough time of it for many, many months, but things turned for the worse in December, and Gordon has been back and forth to Florida many times to help with Gary's cancer. And Gary died Wednesday with Gordon holding him in his arms in the hospital. And Gordon is going to now pack up Gary's house and drive his car to Gary's daughter in Indianapolis, and then hopes to be back among us next week here in Vermont. He's among us in our hearts, I know now. It's been an amazing journey, and Gordon has been the greatest older brother possible, and he deserves our support and our thoughts for now and when he gets back. On a completely different note, Poppy ran a unique event last night online called Will It Waffle. You may have seen the advertising. I tuned in, and there were about 20 people participating, and Marnie agreed to write up a little milestone, since this was our first Will It Waffle event, and I don't think it will be our last. So the way it works is people get out a waffle iron and put anything they can imagine in it and ask, will it waffle? And people organized themselves into teams that had names like Waffle or Burn, Awful Waffles, Trouble with Tacos, and the Bolognies. And the ingredients that were waffled last night included cookie dough, tofu, chicken with rice, tacos, quesadillas, hot dogs, and even a donut with a marshmallow in the hole. And the survivors are in the audience today, so you could see how that went. And it was just a great time for those of us who were spectators and for those who participated. And that spirit of will it waffle, I think, is that spirit that should take us forward into the new year. And the third milestone I want to share is I got an email from Catherine Schloff with a picture, and I believe this is the first congregant whom I have evidence of who visited Lori and Margot Borden and Richard O'Donoghue in their new home in Montana. And Catherine wrote, Merle and I are traveling in the West and had a great day skiing with Lori and Richard, then later met them and Margot at Richard's son's brewery restaurant. They're doing very well in their new home in Montana, and it was a treat for us to see them in that environment. And for those of you who are visiting, I'll just say that this family has been long time members and participants from the earliest days of the congregation. And they have very important family reasons for moving to Montana, but they're still among us as active, distant participants and always in our hearts. So it was great to get that information from Catherine, and I hope that the Schloffs aren't the last CVUUS members to visit the Bordens and Richard. Of course, there's always unspoken joys and concerns, things that we come with on our hearts that weren't shared with me to share with you. And we leave time, a time of silence for people to pray or meditate and get in touch with whatever's on their hearts. I'm also going to leave you a little extra time today. On the back of your service, there's this free thinker space. If you have a pen or a pencil handy and you want to use some of your time for this, I want you to just think about something that you don't know. Something you don't know that strikes you as noteworthy in one way. Just scribble a note to yourself about it. I invite you now into silence.
Away When my heart with sorrow cries, comfort and caress me, and then my soul may hear a voice, a still, small voice of love eternal. Darkness, when my fears arise, let your peace flow through me.
The reading this morning comes from me because Barnaby asked me to tell you 5 things I don't know. Now, I was not supposed to spend a lot of time figuring this out. I was supposed to take kind of the time that you might have had here. So the first one was, I don't know how cars and computers work. So when they need fixing, it's very frustrating. And I have to trust the experts, which happened this last week when my computer would not start. The second thing is, I don't know my paternal grandmother because she died before my parents were married. And I carry her name as my middle name, so that's something I've always wanted to know her. I told you that I was going to retire after the summer, and at this point I don't know who's going to become the next director of the camp that I currently run, but I do know there are 4 well-qualified finalists and a great search committee who will be deciding. Number 4, I don't know what will be next for my mom, who will be turning 92 in May. So for now, the best I can do is be present, help as I can, and hope for the best. And the last on my list is that when I retire in the fall, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I am looking forward to figuring that out.
Thank you, Ellen. So I thought up this little game when I knew I wanted to explore the subject of not knowing today. And as Ellen said, I asked her to imagine 5 things she was pretty sure that I didn't know, and in fact that none of us knew, that she didn't know. And to surprise me, Ellen, ever the conscientious worship associate, asked me for a little more guidance. So I'm going to share with you what was my prompt to her for this. I said to her, examples could be things you don't know because, as far as you know, no one can know them. Things that you don't know because, although they are in theory knowable, no one has ever bothered to know them. And I gave her the example of what's the favorite color of everybody at CVUUS. And then there are things you don't know that probably were known but aren't now. And so I gave her the example of, I know when my great-great-grandfather's family on my mother's side came to the United States, but I have no reason exactly why. I said there are things you value, but you don't know because you trust someone else to know them for you. And maybe the how the cars and computers work fall into that category. Things you don't know because they boggle your mind, even though others know them. maybe the cars and the computers fall into that category as well. I was thinking of string theory or some of the more esoteric parts of physics when I thought of that category. Things that you don't know because you were afraid to ask. And for a lot of us, that's a pretty big category, I think. And I said to her at the end of this prompt, and I'm sure that there are a lot of other categories. So for instance, after I sent the prompt to her, one category that occurred to me, things you don't know because it's in your job description not to ask. As your minister, there is actually in my job description some guidance on not prying about information from you that I don't need to have, which is difficult at times because you never know whether you needed to have that information until after you have it. But there are all of us probably have things that we're not supposed to inquire about, and we know that that's part of the terms of engagement. And then there's a special category in some of these bigger categories that's probably worth thinking about. Since we're dealing with Black History Month, it occurred to me there's a whole category of things you might not know because your ancestors were enslaved people. And things like their names and when they were born were never recorded. Those are things that were known at one point, but are no longer known and probably irretrievable. So why am I talking about all this? I wanted to give you an idea of the vast ecology of not knowing, all the different kinds of beasts that are out there wandering on that landscape. And it's a really interesting thing because, of course, we were born desperate to learn. I mean, babies, even in the womb, are trying to learn. They're listening to their parents' voice, especially their mothers, and they're picking up everything they can sense. And we just know instinctively that what we don't know makes us more vulnerable and can hurt us. And we sense that long before we can name it. I was just thinking about this sense of vulnerability that we have when we even suspect that we don't know what's going on in a situation that we're in. And it brought back to me that visceral feeling as a child when someone says to you, I know something you don't know. And even if you suspect that it's not that important, for a moment there you're thinking, oh my God. So, you know, we have all of these issues with not knowing. I'm going to stop here for just a second. I don't know how many people actually took that moment of silence to write down something, but if you wrote down something that you're willing to share, just raise your hand and say it, and then I'll repeat it for the people on Zoom. It's not, I don't know if anybody got that far because we didn't have a long silence. Paul.
No, I don't have a pencil. I don't know what I don't know, but I'm eager to find out. Or, I don't know, but I don't care.
So Paul, for those of you at home, has divided what he doesn't know into two categories. One, he doesn't know what he doesn't know, but he's eager to find out, and the category of he doesn't know because he doesn't care. So binary thinking there, Paul, be careful about that. Anybody else want to share for a second? Okay. Ellen, one quick question. Is there anything that you thought of after you did your list that if you were doing it again, you would have included?
Well, I did it late last night, so there's nothing.
Yes, Ann.
Some of the items that I wrote down were problems that I have not solved yet. For example, how to fit two unusual watching machines and how to fit the new ones in, and you have a place where you can output it so you don't clog it.
So for those of you at home, Anne said the category that jumped out at her when she was just writing things down was things she doesn't know yet but feels that she has to know at some point, like when she replaces the washing machine that broke down and it's bigger than what she has, how is she going to fit everything else that's in that closet back in there? And you may not know it yet, but you might get rid of some of those things. So anyway, it's amazing when we start to talk about it, how deeply this project of not knowing goes. And it's in almost everything. And in fact, it's, oh, I didn't see you, I'm sorry. Yeah.
We were talking about Lake Champlain, and has Lake Champlain completely frozen this year? I don't know.
So Julie was saying she doesn't know yet if Lake Champlain has completely frozen this year. And well, now you know. The answer is no. But I think this is a subject that's important. I'm going to go on here because there's a lot of things that we don't know that are probably not so easily answered. And this literally is true. I took this from the website of the NASA, the Air and Space Administration. I could have gotten it anywhere, but I was curious about the amount of dark matter and dark energy in the universe. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this concept, the universe doesn't seem to work unless there's a whole bunch of stuff we can't see and sense in any way. And basically, there's secondary evidence that physicists have picked up of some of this stuff, but they really know nothing about what it is. They know that, or they suspect that a certain amount of it is energy and a certain amount of it is matter. And they call it dark energy and dark matter. So for the universe to be behaving the way it seems to be behaving from what we can see, 68% of the universe has to be this unexplained, unknown dark energy, and 27% of it has to be this unexplained or unknown dark matter. And the rest, everything on Earth, everything ever observed, with all of our instruments, all normal matter, I'm reading from the NASA site now, adds up to less than 5% of the universe. Come to think of it, maybe it shouldn't be called normal matter at all, since it is such a small fraction of the universe. So we live in a universe, this universe of which we are a part, according to our seventh principle, that is fundamentally not known. And even before we get to the actual physical universe that we live in, and this not knowing, the whole history of religions tells us that not knowing is at the heart of every great religious question. Is there a God or gods or whatever? We don't know, except for what we take on faith. What happens after death? We don't know, but we take on faith or feel in our guts. Why is there evil? Lots of theories, no certain knowledge. In fact, there's a whole school of religion some of you may have heard of called the Via Negativa, the negative way, that says the only way to approach an understanding of the divine is to talk about all the things the divine is not. You know, the divine is not material, the divine is not this, the divine is not that. And then you begin to get the outlines of the space that the divine fills. So the Via Negativa has been around as a fundamental issue for a long time. And then, of course, another fundamental issue in all religions is how do we know what we know? Every religion has a different answer. Some of them say you know it from reading the Bible. Some of it say you know it from worshiping your ancestors. Some of them say it's just unknowable. But this is like a fundamental question in all religious thinking. Now, our plight might not be as bad as I suggested in that NASA example. I have to share with you this quote I came across from Ambrose Bierce, the author of The Devil's Dictionary 100 years ago, where he had some fairly sardonic definitions of almost everything that he wrote about. And he defined reality as the dream of a mad philosopher and the nucleus of a vacuum. So basically, you've got nothing to go on in reality, according to this definition. But where does that leave us as UUUs? Actually, we've made the search for a free and responsible search for truth one of our fundamental principles. So we have been saying that there is something to knowing, and it's worth our time to focus on that in a responsible way. And we talk about the inherent worth of dignity of every person. I think that's going to expand over time to every being. And a free and responsible church's search for truth is going to be to try and understand better and better how other beings experience their truths, even though communication across those barriers of life forms is of course incredibly difficult. At any rate, this idea that God, if there is one, is beyond our understanding is a very ancient principle and warning. Jews and Christians have in the story of Job, God basically telling Job, give up trying to understand. You can't, it's beyond your capacity. And yet we can't let go of this issue because it's probably the single best way of distinguishing us from all other living things is how we know and what we know and how we pass on what we know. So one thing for sure is that what we know is at the heart of how we connect with each other. And I came across a humorous example of this week, which I'll share with you. Some of you may have heard it. It's part of the origin story of Marlon Brando as an actor. He took a method acting class from Stella Adler, who was one of the famous teachers of method acting, and she gave the class an assignment. She says, there's an atomic bomb falling to Earth, and you're a chicken. What are you going to do? And the whole class starts running around like crazy in a panic, and Marlon Brando squats down and just sits there very peacefully, and when the time comes for him to explain what he did, he says, well, chickens don't know anything about atomic bombs, so I'm just laying an egg. Now, what's interesting about this answer is it's only really good as far as it goes. Anybody who's spent time around chickens in a flock knows if one of them's panicking, they're all panicking. So if he was really acting like a chicken, and everybody around him was panicking, even if he didn't know why, he would have started panicking. And I love this story because it shows you there's these layers of knowing and not knowing in a kind of a humorous way. And I think we need to keep our sense of humor when we deal with a subject this complex. Otherwise, we're just going to drown on it. But when I come back to where I want to be on this, it goes back to those questions that Black Lives of UU posed in our call to worship. And just tinkering with them a little bit, I would say it comes down to this. Does our relationship to what we know point us to liberation, compassion, love, and justice? Does our relationship to what we don't know call us to foster communal well-being? So when we think about what we don't know, are we feeling called to come up with an answer that's good for the community? When we think about what we don't know, are we being called to liberation, compassion, love, and justice by our awareness of what we don't know? Does our relationship to what we don't know call us to prioritize actions, to prioritize humanity as only one part of a complex web of existence? Does what we don't know call us to never forget that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves? Does our relationship to what we don't know invite us to love folks in the fullness of their complex identity? So I've tinkered with those blue words a little bit, but I think that actually gives me, anyway, a way forward about thinking about what I don't know. Is what I don't know, am I approaching it with these questions in mind? So I want to close this reflection by telling you a story about what a Unitarian church did with what it didn't know that I thought was important, both for it only taking them a little bit of the way towards what they didn't know, but also for a commitment to knowing things that matter in the way these blue questions matter. And this is a story about the Unitarian congregation in Charleston, South Carolina. Some of you here last fall know that Michelle and I visited South Carolina to meet the parents of the woman I think Linus will eventually marry, but they're taking their time. Anyway, we took some time after that to go to Charleston, and I wanted to see the Unitarian Church there, which is a historic, beautiful building. It's the second oldest church in all of Charleston. And as you go in, there's this beautiful garden to the right of the church, very overgrown, like an English-style garden. It's no Versailles. And at the very entrance to the garden now, there's this monument you can see a picture of, just a square of bricks. And what that is in 2010, the church tore down a little bit of the entrance to the church in order to make it wheelchair accessible. So the church had been there since the late 1700s, and they're finally getting around to doing some work on making it easier for people who have trouble walking to get into the building. This is progress. In doing that, they had a bunch of bricks that they took down that were part of the original brick structure, which is now mostly covered over, but is still there. And all of those bricks were fashioned out of clay by enslaved people, and then the church was built by enslaved people. And this was their history. And someone said we needed to salvage as many of these bricks as we can and do something very visible with them so that we don't forget. So what they did, they ended up with 100 bricks they could save, roughly 100 bricks, and they built this square at the entrance to their garden that everybody from all of Charleston comes to see. And at the bottom there of the monument, it explicitly says this is to remind us of the enslaved. It's in memory of those enslaved workers who made these bricks and helped build our church. And they put this symbol on the front of it. And Marty, if you can switch to the next slide so people can see the symbol better. So this symbol comes from a tribe in Ghana, and it's called Sankofa. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. It's a bird that's facing forward but looking back. It's often depicted picking up an egg and that it's going to carry forward into the future. And this is a symbol that came to the United States. Before it was even the United States, it came to North America with enslaved people. And it literally means it's not taboo to return to fetch something you forgot earlier on, or in shorter form, return and fetch it. Sankofa. And so they are going back into their history to return and fetch something that it's important for them to know and think about and work on for all the purposes that were mentioned in those principles. For them to be loving going forward, to remember they're part of something bigger than their existence, for them to remember injustice in the past, and to keep close to them in their hearts as they go forward as a community, what they need to work on. And they can't get into their church without walking past that, without thinking about it. And people can't visit their gardens without being reminded of this. And a little bit more about this. This actual symbol was made for them by the nephew of a man named Philip Simmons, who became the most famous ironworker in Charleston in the 20th century. And he was an African-American man, and he learned his trade from a formerly enslaved blacksmith. So this is the tradition passed down by African-American enslaved people through this workshop by African-Americans who continue to make ironwork. And they were the ones who were commissioned to make the Sankofa sign for the church. The famous ironworker's name is Philip Simmons. You can find extensive information about him on Wikipedia or anything else. And his workshop still continues with people learning the ways that this ironwork was made and continuing on. It's an amazing story. He eventually ended up with he lived to be 97, and he ended up with every honor an artist could get. He got commissions like building a gate for the Smithsonian Museum, but of course, most of his life, he was ignored, except locally. And it was a very difficult time building that up. And now his nephew, Carlton Simmons, is the one who made that symbol. So this is a better late than never story in some respects, but it's a story moving in the right direction. When you read the history of this church, that it was built by owners of enslaved people. They were one of the first churches in the country to be openly Unitarian. And the minister there for 40 years who led them in this, he and his wife had enslaved people working in their house. Interestingly enough, he never spoke publicly from the pulpit in favor of slavery, but he did privately endorse that form of living. And his wife, who was a very prominent writer, was an outspoken supporter of slavery. And the church closed completely during the Civil War and had trouble reestablishing itself afterwards, was saved basically by one industrialist who had made his fortune bringing ice from New England down to people in Charleston. And the people who could afford the ice, of course, were people who owned enslaved African Americans. The only reason he had the money after the war was he refused to invest any of his money in Confederate currency and had parked it all abroad. So I'm not sure exactly what his feelings were. He was born in New Hampshire. The name was Alva Gage. The history is incredibly complex. Now, you might think I'm bringing it up because it's Black History Month. I actually have a lot of problems with Black History Month for the reason that Poppy alluded to at the end of her talk. Black history is American history, and I think that the idea of confining it to a month just eats at me in the wrong way. And I've had trouble dealing with this until Jenna Caldwell, a member of the congregation and the leader of the local Showing Up for Racial Justice group, posted on their site a piece this week, I don't know how many of you saw it, by the writer Ijimo Oluo, who is the author of the book, So You Want to Talk About Race? She said that Black History Month is actually the culmination of efforts that started nearly a century ago by Black people to celebrate the survival that Poppy talked about and all the great things in their traditions. The problem is when you create this National Black History Month, a lot of white people have a little tour into the pain of this history. And it makes it harder for African Americans to have what is supposed to be just a celebration of everything that was great for them, and there actually end up being witness to the majority of the country simply not getting it and looking at the wrong things in the wrong way, which takes away a lot of their ability to celebrate it. And she writes, right now there are renewed and strengthening efforts to remove studies of Black history and therefore American history from schools where young people can get them. Those who have not had enough decades lived in collective whiteness fear the enlightenment and growth that a true study of our history can bring. And so there's a need to fight this. And she concludes this essay that Joanna posted. Right now, real history is being banned from schools because parents do not want their children to reject fear and take the important steps toward growth that they themselves are too terrified to take. They do not want their children to bring mirrors home. And then she goes on in her very last sentence, says, Black History Month should be ours to cultivate and celebrate, but Black history itself is also a reckoning that white America must face every month of the year. And I wanted to end with this point because I think this congregation is working hard on doing that. It's working hard on reading the big picture stuff, but it's also working hard on saying, what can we do in every little thing that we do in terms of how we're organized, what our programming is, to be aware of this past and to be aware of how our efforts to deal with it can be hard on our African American members and yet necessary, and that it's something that we need to keep doing until we spend less time feeling embarrassed and apologetic and more time feeling that's the work and we're going to keep doing it. So not knowing is not easy. There's so much we don't know in this field as in so many others. This is an example of a special kind of not knowing that I think is religiously very important. It's not knowing what we need to know, but knowing that together we can keep working on it. So that's what I ask you to take with you out of our worship here today. Blessed be and amen.
For my benediction, I just want to say that we have a guest book out there on the table where people came in. It's been very lonely for months to look back to the last entry. So if you're visiting us and willing to sign the guest book on the way out, that would be really wonderful. So I want to send this forth, feeling hopeful that we have something that's very important to work on, and that we are on the right track.
And the important thing is for us just to keep going, to keep our sense of humor. Remember the story about Marlon Brando laying the egg? Don't forget the real nature of chickens. And be joyful that we can be together on this really important way of being in this world. Blessed be.
Good morning, Zoomers. I'm going to set up two breakout rooms in just a minute. Hang on. Hopefully, Margie is not casting this into the room. So let me move ahead, creating two breakout rooms. I'm letting the systems assign you all randomly.